We're good.
All right, at this time, we're going to call this meeting to order. Val, please call the roll.
Commissioner Penny,
Here.
Commissioner Curry, Commissioner Danio,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Mayor Via.
Here. All right, we're here to speak about the enterprise funds. Mr. Forte, you want to lead off?
Yeah, we're going to have Stella come up. Oh, we still don't have our overhead thing done.
Yeah.
Still don't have our overhead thing. I got to send an email and find out the status of that. So this is just the enterprise fund capital budget for now. And then if you want to talk about some other things at the end, if we have time, that's fine, but we'll be preparing the balance of the budget presentations at another meeting. So we'll go through each of the departments, answer any questions that you might have, get any direction that you want, and kind of turn it over to Stella.
And it's operating and capital.
What did I say?
You said capital.
Oh, at the capital, operating budget. That's because I was just looking at the capital.
Both of them.
All right, Mrs. Gurney, take.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, most of the Commissioners. So tonight we are going over the enterprise funds for the city, which are the business type funds. So water, sewer, stormwater, solid waste are the funds that we're going over. And then we'll also be looking the budget for the new year, 2022, and we'll also at the end then look at what's coming up on the budget calendar. So, the PowerPoint, and then if we need to go to the spreadsheet, yeah. So the first slide there is just a kind of a example of how your detailed sheets look. So the book that you have, it has the PowerPoint that is the summarized version of what I'm going over tonight. And then in the back under tab, the first tab, you have the revenues for the different funds. And under tab 2, you have all the detail of the expenses for the different funds. So there's a lot of detail in there. And I'll primarily be going over the summary information, but if you want to dive into the detail, we can dive into whatever level of detail that you want. But this shows what that detail looks like, and it's just trying to show to you that it's got a couple of years of actuals, so the 2019 and the 2020 fiscal year actuals, and then it's got the original budget for the current fiscal year. And the reason we use the original budget is that is the most comparable to what the original budget of next year will be. Because right now we're operating on an amended budget that has carryover projects and things that weren't finished that were carried over and adjusted the budget into the current year. And then we have year-to-date actuals for this fiscal year. And also then the request for next year, and you'll see there's some details on some of the miscellaneous details that says like level 1 in text. That goes with the year that we're requesting. So that it's highlighted in blue or the light blue so you can see what figure it goes with. And I did try to get the worksheet to move it over a little bit so it would line up a little bit better with that column. And then the last column simply gives you a variance between the original budget of this year and what we're requesting for next year. Okay, Val? So overall, on the requested for next year, there's a 5.5% increase on water sewer rates, and that's the third year of the 5-year rate study plan that we did that was completed a couple years ago. We're not requesting any changes on the water sewer R&R fees. That's the $3 water, $3 sewer that's on the monthly bills, and that's for future R&R for the water and sewer system. And then we're not recommending any changes on the stormwater assessments. which is the $96 per equivalent residential unit per year. And we're also not requesting any changes on the solid waste charges. And we'll get into more of how we're funding things as we get into the detailed funds. So the next slide. So this just kind of gives you a picture of the historical 2019 to where we're requesting for 2022. In the 2020 fiscal year, the blip that you see there, we had a $350,000 just about FDEP grant for grit removal at the sewer plant. And so that's why there's a blip in revenue and expenses in that year. And as already mentioned, the charges for services is per the rate study going up to 5.5%. And then the next one. So this is just a snapshot in a summary basis of what's being proposed for next year. And even the slide in just a minute will take the original budget this year and compare it, so you'll be able to do that in just a minute. But looking at the revenue, as we discussed, it includes the increase. There is internal charges that come from the general fund to help pay for the admin department of Public Works because they serve the general fund. They oversee the streets and facilities and parks programs in the general fund. And there's a transfer from the stormwater fund that funds a portion of the VACON debt service payment that comes out of the water sewer fund. And then there's transfers out of, if you look at the expenditure side, transfers out of the fund that go to the capital outlay fund. And in the fund itself, we do have some equipment capital outlay within the operating fund itself. And what we're proposing there is there's some pump replacements to the tune of about $37,000. And Antoine, is that sewer or both? Sewer. Okay, so they're pumps primarily for the lift stations. So as you can imagine, we've got. Okay, so that's the replacement program for that. And then we do have right now $279,000 for the different vehicle replacements, but we just met this week and we're working on, they were primarily for a truck that's called a shuttle really, that moves the sludge for the sludge hauling. And we were just working this week on, we just met earlier this week, or yesterday? And we may be able to get that truck this year as a used vehicle and save quite a bit from what we thought we might have to put in the budget next year. And also, there was a gator requested, and that also we think we may be able to fund this year, and we'll get into it a little bit more. We're going to go over some capital stuff here in just a minute. We do have a reserve, a contingency reserve of a little over $200,000 that we're putting in the fund in case of emergencies, which always seems to happen in water sewer. So that's kind of the overview, and then the next slide. So looking at the original budget from this year, comparing it to the proposed for next year, the revenue, the majority of the changes is the rate change. Under operating expenses, we are seeing increases in operating expenses. You're well aware of the fuel prices going up. It's also affecting chemical prices. And really all of our operating supplies are increasing because of the fuel prices going up. The capital expenditures we just talked about, and the debt service is going down a little bit because there was one debt issue that was paid off this year. So a little bit of a reduction in the debt service cost.
When we look at the revenue, Stella, going from 7.145 to 7.705, that's a little higher than the 5% rate increase. Like $200,000.
Okay, part of it, it was an increase in what was coming over from the general fund for the Public Work
Okay.
Admin Department, because that's made looking at actuals
Gotcha.
for that. Okay.
Thanks.
And then I think penalties also keep going up.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, and next one. Okay. And then we always want to make sure that we're maintaining the reserve levels in our operating fund. That is by the policy that the commission approved. So the Government Finance Officers Associations recommend at least 45 to 90 days of an unrestricted fund balance as a reserve. This chart lays out your unrestricted and your restricted fund balance, and as you can see, a large portion of the water sewer fund is restricted. The policy requires that for 2022, based on what we're proposing for the budget, the reserve would need to be $1,078,000, and we have more than sufficient reserves in that fund. So
Yes.
that's,
Is that correct? 6 million unrestricted?
yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now, I will say, there's lots of capital needs in that fund, which we're getting ready to go over some more. It's just a matter of how quickly we can get the projects done. In fact, I hadn't even talked to the city manager yet, but I ran a report of our meter and the ages of our meters, and we've got meters from 97, 98 in the ground. So that program needs to be looked at. That's your cash register coming in
Yeah.
for the water sewer fund. And then we're going to go into the impact and capital. This is the water impact fee. We're not proposing any budget in there for next year. We had 9,700 this year, but right now we've only collected a couple thousand, and right now the new building, this is only generated when you have new building, not renovations, is not coming in because we're pretty much built out. So the next slide goes into the sewer impact fees, and it's kind of the same thing. We're not proposing a budget in there because, again, we've only gotten a couple of thousand in this year, even though we have 7,000 budgeted. And then the next slide, this is the R&R fund, which has the R&R fee, but also you might have picked up on it when I talked about the operating fund earlier. The operating fund always transfers money into this fund for capital projects. If you would ask Antoine, we could probably give him the entire city budget and he would spend it for water and sewer. Unfortunately, we can't do that, so we have to put in what we can. So that we're not, again, doing any rate increase on those R&R fees. There is, and this compares it to the current budget compared to next year. So we are reducing the overall suggested expenditures just slightly. There is $100,000 from CDBG grant for one of the lift stations. And we are transferring in $372,000 from the water operating fund to fund capital. Then the next slide goes into more detail. I wanted to just give you a snapshot of this year's projects. And again, we just met yesterday and went over the status of a bunch of these. We are looking at reallocating some of the funds. They didn't quite have to use what was budgeted for some of these projects into doing some engineering work for upcoming capital that we're proposing for next year. And that has to do, which we'll see in a minute, with the sand filter, the clear well, and 3rd Street water main. So, and lift station 19. So we're going to be reallocating some money to be able to do the engineering to get ready for the future projects. Then the next slide. And this is what's being proposed for the capital for next year. Lift Station 19, which is partially funded from the CDBG grant, a little over $100,000 from it, the sand filter, and the clear well. And if you have any questions about those, I can refer it to Antoine.
Joe, weren't we going to do several lift stations each year?
We do.
Why is there only one?
Because if you look at the current year, we've got several lift stations that are in process.
So you did extra this year, so,
Actually, the reason is based on our funding, we needed to do the sand.
Oh, for the
filter
sand
first.
filter, right.
The sand filter became the priority over the lift station number 20, I think.
Yeah, but we've got, in the current year, we've got 17B and 5. 11's a rehab, and then we're doing the design, 9 and 10. That,
Next year is 19.
next year's
9 and
19, but this
Nine
year's
and 10.
17.
So,
Yeah,
some of these projects in '21 were projects that carried over from actually, some of them 19 and some of them 20, because sometimes it takes a year or two. We do the engineering one year, and then it may cross 2 years to actually get the project done. So these weren't all just 2021 projects, they're just in the amended budget this year.
but you're right, the goal is to try to get 2 lift stations per year, and over the 20-year period, we'll then start the clock over again, because
Right.
we should get 20 years out of them to cover our, 40 lift stations? 40 lift stations? Yeah, pretty close to 40 lift stations, so.
So then why are we only planning to do one this year? It's all
Money.
up time,
sand filter
so that's going to take more time?
No, it's gonna take more money.
takes more money. The sand filter needs to be replaced in the plant. So when we looked at the priorities for us, we said that's number 1 priority, actually number 2 priority, because the 19 was number 1 because there's funding in there. So that's why we went with the sand filter.
And we may be able to change this, because like I said, we're just now going through some shifting of funds to do the engineering for this, and the truck, whatever the dump
Shuttle.
thing, yeah, is going to be less. So we may actually be able, before we give you the final budget, to add another lift station in there.
Okay.
This is the design. This is the design.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just
Yes.
quick question. I know department heads put all their dreams out there, and then we have to prioritize them because of money, and I appreciate you prioritizing these things, Antoine, but if we need another lift station and we have a lot of money in the reserves, do we have the manpower to, what I see is a lot of the capital projects, we roll and roll and roll because we don't have,
That's contracted out.
it's contracted. So should we consider that, or are we okay?
You could.
She said the budget for it. You give me
Yeah.
money, I'll believe you.
You'll spend it, right?
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, anytime that we have, there's a need. The need is there. The need is there constantly because our system is
Old.
antiquated and we need to start doing some.
But if we could be proactive instead of reactive on some of these things, it's cheaper.
And that's what.
Just like the roads, we did
Keep that
roads.
mindset for the next budget session.
Okay,
But-
That's the challenge.
that's, okay.
I guess, we could always pull, the reserve is healthy.
Yeah, it looks like the reserve's over a year's worth instead of 45 to 90 days.
So
So we'll go back to that.
we can go back and look at it and bring
Well, to John's
amended
point,
suggestion or whatever back to the next workshop.
well, and I don't think none of us are fighting to necessarily spend that money, but if our 20-year plan, if we can get there in 19 years, well, that gives us an extra year of maybe leeway where things won't break down. So I think that's kind of what
That's
you're
kinda what I'm
thinking.
looking at. I
If
mean-
we have a healthy reserve.
Yeah, and I just want to say for Antoine's benefit and your water people's benefit, that it's nice that we're trying to do lift stations every year, but there's many needs also in the water side of life. And we will be looking at the American Recovery Act funds, and those may be best or easiest to spend on water and sewer infrastructure projects.
Great point, actually.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
Thank you.
thank you. It's not often you probably hear us telling, why aren't we spending this?
1 year.
Okay.
1 year, Elizabeth,
Albert?
yeah, at the last budget meeting, she increased the millage.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's very hard to spend money you weren't planning to spend, so we are scrambling to find something to spend. And it wasn't a lot of money, it was like maybe $60,000, but
Okay,
it's easy
Yes,
to do
ma'am.
whatever.
Thank you.
we're good now with water and
Yes,
sewer?
thank you.
Okay. So now we're going to move on to the stormwater fund, and this is the operating fund portion of it. And the revenue, as you know, coming into this is the non-ad valorem stormwater assessment fee. Looking at the years, you'll see a spike in the 2020 fiscal year. And what happened there is our new auditors helped identify that we had sold the old Vacon truck, and the depreciation had not been done correctly on the old truck. So we had to expense that depreciation that should have occurred previously. So that was a tune of about $198,000 loss. While it's not cash, it does go as an expense in the fund. And then we also did a transfer in 2020 to the reserve fund, to the capital projects fund, which we always do every year to help fund the capital projects. Okay. And this gives you a snapshot of the current fiscal year original budget, the revenue, and the expenses. And as you'll see, the blue color is the current year, and the kind of aqua turquoise color is the proposed budget. The charges for services are going up slightly, and I will say that our consultant, Mr. Peterson, has been instrumental in getting corrections and getting things straightened out in the assessments. So he has been well worth the funds that we are, more than bringing back the funds that we are paying for his
I send you that
expenses.
report every month. If you take a look at it, you'll see what Ernie Peterson is sending on our stormwater.
So the rates aren't going up, but we're just finding more people that weren't paying the proper rate.
Correct.
Right. Some people not paying a rate at all.
Well, we have that problem too. And then for the current year, as we just talked in the other fund, there are operating expenses going up, about $24,000 in the repair and replacement. And then in general, as you know, the fuel charges and other operating supplies, the charges are going up. We are planning to move more to the capital project this year. That's why you see the transfer and other expense going up to the capital fund. Okay, and the next slide, I just want you to go past because my slide's messed up. As you see, there's only one column, but this slide discusses it anyway. So this is the capital fund for the stormwater fund. In the current year, we have two projects, the Flomage Street drainage pipe and then the Mirage Pond. And in next year, we're proposing, or Antoine's proposing, the Tuscaloosa pipe replacement, stormwater pipe lining, and then the engineering costs for the duct bill. And if you have any questions on those, I would defer it to Antoine. All good?
Yep.
And so, then the next slide moves right on into the solid waste fund, and it compares the years' revenue and expenses over the years. I will mention in 2019, we had investment earnings of about 84,000, and in 2020, about 44. We know we won't be getting those anytime, that kind of level anytime soon. We are including a 6% CPI for the contractor. We don't know what it'll be yet. I believe it's in August or July, late July, September, when they have to tell us what their request is for that.
But they submitted the paper that they are requesting.
They are definitely requesting a CPI. We just don't know the measurement of whether it'll be 6 or 5 or whatever. If you want to go on to the next one. So, again, we're not proposing a rate change, and we're including the 6%. So how are we funding it? We're funding it $113,000 from reserves, and actually the next slide talks about that more. We have very healthy reserve in the solid waste fund, which is our primary reserve if there is a emergency that includes debris that I'm not going to say the name of. So our policy requires a minimum of 20%, and based on the operating budget, that would be $545,000. And as you see, we have between close to $5 million in there. So we are proposing to fund the 113,000 of the operating. So in other words, we're primarily eating the
Increase.
6% increase with the funding it from the reserves.
We'll be able to absorb solid waste increases for a little while. I don't see a need to be increasing that.
But it could actually, you could have a 2 or 3 year delay in emergency spending and waiting on FEMA reimbursement, which
Yes,
is
you
that's what
could.
we recently had.
which we
is why we
recently
have-
experienced.
Yeah, we have a healthy fund, but
Right.
Right, because we've gotten back most, well, except for the pier seawall situation, we've gotten back most of the FEMA reimbursements. There was just a couple that we talked about yesterday, the smaller ones that we don't have yet. So,
How long is the solid waste contract for?
I just looked at it the other day. I think we have another 7 years left.
Yeah, it's 10 years from 2018.
Yeah.
2018?
Yes.
2018 to 2020.
Okay. And we're not expecting it to be higher than 6%?
that's,
Well, the CPI, it's the CPI for the year.
In the
So,
southeast region?
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
If
it
it's
could be,
5,
but,
We hope it's 3, we hope it's 4. but,
Right.
I mean, the pandemic, but now after, things are picking up, so.
So,
6%, I read it today in New Business News.
Oh, yeah.
6.6%.
okay. Thank you.
so before we discuss the rest of the budget calendar, just want to ask if there's any questions about the enterprise funds. We're all good, very good. So this is the upcoming budget calendar. Of course, we had the enterprise funds we discussed tonight. The general and special revenue funds will be in 2 weeks on the 27th at the workshop. On the 27th also at the commission meeting, we will need to establish the maximum millage rate. And again, that's the maximum. You can go down from that, although I don't encourage it. But you can go down from that rate on the 27th. And then September 13th will be the adoption of the tentative millage rate and budget. And the 28th of September would be the final hearing for the final millage rate and budget. And that's all I have.
Awesome. Are there any further questions?
Why do we have so much in penalties?
Say that again?
Because during
Just for
the,
late payments?
huh?
What's the penalties for late payments?
Late payments, not paying past due bills. I think our rate is 10% and $25, I believe. But yes,
It's quite a bit. It seemed like around 300 grand or so.
yes, I just had a discussion with a customer last week about if you could just get caught up, you wouldn't be paying all this extra money every month. And we encourage customers in that situation to go to the aid agencies. You know, Volusia County has aid, some of the churches have aid, and we give that information to them from customer service and try to get them to get aid if they're in need.
And then you have interest on that. Interest as well, penalty and interest. Sounds like IRS.
Well, that's all in one
Oh, that's the
thing.
interest
It's
that's
10
earned.
It's 10%. Every month, though.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Gurney.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate having this well in advance, and I'll print it out. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. So we still have 25 minutes left in the workshop. Joe, I don't know if you want to speak on anything. Do we want to speak more on budget? Do we want to?
Well,
Speak
we
about
can
the
speak just theoretically
coronavirus.
with the budget. We've been working, Stella and Amy and the department heads have been doing a phenomenal job on working through this budget. And honestly, we're not, at least I don't feel we're in as much under pressure with the numbers as we have been in the past, because we had some assistance with the CARES Act this past year. So, I'm still looking for direction from you as far as setting that millage rate. Mayor, I know where you stand, but the staff will probably come in with the proposed millage rate the same as it was in the previous years, which I think is 6.25. That's what the millage has been, and we'll propose a budget at that rate and then see where we actually spill out when it's all said and done. One of the things, we have there's a lot of projects that are still going on. There's a lot of projects that are pending. We talked a little bit yesterday about the lack of the inmates that we're not getting, and don't really see a light at the end of the tunnel for that. I don't know if we'll get them back soon or if at all. Just don't know. And we can't keep going on the way we have been. So we could either look at a couple of options of either hiring another person on to help with that, or contracting that service out. So we haven't really dove into that too deep, but we've got to do something about it. But I'm not seeing any time frame when they're going to start bringing those inmates back. So, if you want to let me know what your thoughts are on millage, we try to bring you a good balanced budget with as many projects in there as we possibly can. Keeping in mind, and after the commission meeting tonight, we'll do a shade meeting, an executive session about the union contracts, and I'll bring you up to date on where we are with that. But we have to still fund that for this 3-year contract period, and it's never going to go away. Wages is always going to be a substantial part of your budget. We're a service-oriented business, so to speak, and that's what we do, is we provide people services, not so much product. And we've got, what was I just going to say? Forgot.
Maybe the coronavirus physical
Public Works, how
recovery?
great they are? Oh, the building in Public Works, that's, we haven't finished diving into that. Last year, we looked at, we're in need of a building over in Public Works, and we had funded, what was it, $150,000 for a building. We went out to bid, it actually came back, over $250 for the building. And now with...
Is that just for storage?
No, it's storage, it's small mechanic shop, it's police storage area for evidence. There's a number of different things. And now that Pictona 2 is coming into play, the barn that we call where Manny Manny and Dennis work out of over by 10th Street, that building's got to come down. It's in pretty bad shape. It needs to come down anyway, but the development of Pictona 2 is going to advance that. So we have to add that on, and, there's some of the scary numbers are close to $800,000. So I'm looking at alternatives to that, whether it's off-site buildings that we can look at. I'm even looking at the county facility on Walker Street.
I was gonna ask you, what's the status of that? I
It's-
drove past there today. It looks vacant.
It is vacant. It's been surplus. They're requesting bids. I think the bids that they're requesting is by the end of this week. So we're not really in a position to put a bid in on the property. But we might need to, and it's a big piece of property. I don't know if we would need the whole thing.
Does
even if-
American Legion own some of that too? Right next to
No.
it, in between,
Well, no, they own to the west of it.
on the other side.
What's the do we know the value? Are there any minimum
I think
bids, Joe? or-
650,000.
I think it was 550.
550.
551 something.
Wow, okay. I'm just thinking, it's a big chunk of dirt in
That
the
is-
middle of our city.
That is a big piece of property, and
Big
that
piece of
seems
property.
low.
It floods, the grounds flood. There are some problems with it. I'd hate to buy something at a good deal for 600,000 and have to put 2 million into fixing it.
Yeah.
So,
Not only fixing it, Joe.
Maintain.
There's other things.
yeah.
Gas in the ground.
Might be some environmental concerns.
We haven't even looked at contamination of the tanks.
And actually, they sent us something that basically said they have not done any any geotech reports which tells you if there's any contamination, anything. They have not. It's basically as is. You do what you.
Buyer beware.
So there are other warehouse buildings around the city that we could look at, whether it's for short-term or maybe even long-term. Manny and Dennis already work off-site. Nothing says we can't find another off-site building to either buy or lease that they could work out of while we kind of struggle through this high cost of steel period that we're going through. So we're looking at a couple of different options.
Where do they work off-site?
At 10th Street by the ball fields. That's where the barn is.
Oh, so they work right out of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So you'll see a vehicle or two parked over there.
Serves also as a storage.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just they're working
It-
there.
it's not just a shop.
They're storing
Right.
materials and stuff like that in there.
Okay.
Yeah, remember, we used to store a lot of things over in the two buildings in Hollyland Park,
Right.
and those things have been relocated over there, so.
Also, well, and since we're kind of on the water, so first off, I wanted to let you know, Antoine, and Ms. Forte might have let you know, I got a phone call yesterday from the gentleman on Indian Oaks who had sewage back up into his house, and he was so beyond thankful for your crew. He said he called after hours. He was so surprised somebody answered the phone, got a crew out there immediately, and then the very next morning came back out. They were working on it all day. He was very, very thankful. That was great. And he asked about, he said that the part that he lives, that happens, it's happened before a couple times. And he said that he thought maybe it was clay pipes and then you said maybe asbestos.
You could have asbestos pipe in the ground, I don't know how old it is.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I didn't look
But-
into it,
but could you come to the lectern? I want to make sure to get you.
trying to find what the price for the buildings are. Yeah.
So, but the question that he asked is this in any plan to be fixed anytime soon? And I didn't have the answer for him. Do we have any?
Is it constantly, is he saying that's constantly?
He said it's happened before, yeah, several times.
Well,
So.
depending on, the issue for us is what is creating the problem? Is it a pipe or is it the sewer? The sewer coming through. Right now, we have, for the past few months, for some reason, we have been seeing a lot of grease buildups in the pipes that we have. So that could be, and I remember them saying that they did some jet vacuuming of these pipes, and that what they found is incredible stuff, lots of grease and the grease, the problem with grease, it doesn't flow. It just
Clunks.
clogs and builds up, and more grease makes it a big bowl, and the bowl blocks it. So today, actually, I know that we have to use outside services to jet vac with hot water to be able to suck all that out. So I think that's what happened with this issue, and this is not the first time. They've done it a few times in past years, but nothing new. But I'll find out for you if that's the area that we're talking about.
Okay.
So,
Well, and the only reason I bring it up is because, and later on, I plan to bring up to the commission the coronavirus local fiscal recovery funds from the American Rescue
Yeah.
Plan. And Joe and I yesterday attended a county meeting about it. And, the thing that gets my attention is that we could get a lot of these types of projects that are very tough to fund and they're very expensive to get those funded through this.
Yeah.
So,
we just got the pipelining contract with the county that we're going to start using to line some of our pipes. So if we get the money, we'll do it. I mean, they come in, they line those pipes if there's a problem with the pipes. Some of that we're going to do on Tuscaloosa. So that's one of the projects, but that's stormwater, not sewer.
okay.
But they've done a lot of sewers apparently in the past.
Yeah, we did a lot of sewers.
A lot of sewer lining in the past, but that could be a line pipe, or it could be a clay pipe, or it could be an asbestos pipe, so.
Okay, good.
But we'll find out for you.
Yeah. I just want to keep,
The money is available, I mentioned before, if that money's available, and it's not a pretty project that the public gets to see, but any water, wastewater project which is clearly qualified and easy to track and maintain for the auditing process. But whether it's water and sewer line replacements or linings or other expansions at the plant, if they qualify, that's kind of the direction that staff in most cities are leaning toward our utility projects. Like I said, they're easy to get qualified and track and do, and you don't have to worry about too much follow-up. This process of this grant is going to be very similar to a FEMA reimbursement grant. So everything's got, some jurisdictions are even looking at third-party overseers, like we use Tetra Tech for debris, having third parties come in and monitor that grant, just so that we don't have to deal with this whole nonsense that we did like with FEMA.
wow.
Yeah, so.
I think it's great. You say it's not pretty, Joe, but when the sewer system doesn't work, it's very ugly.
Well, here's how you have to look at it. These projects, the water and sewer projects, are going to need to be done at some point, no matter what.
Right.
And, you may not be charging your taxpayer for those repairs, but you're charging your ratepayers, you're recharging your utility customers. So we may be able to maintain a better utility rate cost and be able to absorb some of that if we can use that money for those projects, rather than we're doing it and having to generate, either borrow money, which we used to do years ago, we borrowed a lot of money for some of those projects, or fund it through even a longer period of time and fund it through our actual collections of revenues.
Yeah, it's an aging system with such an old city, so I think that's it. Thank you, Antoine. Anybody have any comments?
Not for these
Jeff,
funds.
can you go down and unlock it, open the door downstairs? There's some folks trying to get in.
Anything else from the commission? Joe, anything else?
Nope, not at this point. Do you have anybody want to comment on millage at this time? You want to wait?
Well, millage, where I'm at, I want to fight to try to get down to have no tax increase at a rollback rate. I haven't been able to see the next budget's going to be the fun one, so we're
Yeah.
going to have to dive into that one. That's the one that really matters. We're really healthy and obviously these accounts, which is nice. But, so I got to take a look, but I always come at it at the mindset of not raising taxes
But
at a
just like I
start.
said,
so.
and I know, and you and I will always have this debate, you wanting to go to the rollback and me telling you costs are going up and somebody's got to cover it, and it is what it is.
Right. Anybody else?
Well, I don't really have any comment on the millage, but I do have a pet project, so that's going to affect millage and spending. I've been talking to Mr. Forte about our restrooms, our park restrooms.
Yeah.
I recently visited a national park with no electricity and no running water, and the bathrooms were better than ours.
I believe it.
And that was sad. And so if we're spending money improving the parks and we want people to go, a natural thing to do at the parks is to
Scott, we're in a meeting, workshop, yep.
a natural thing would be to visit our public restrooms. And I would encourage you to visit our public restrooms.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, actually, I'm right there behind you
But
because,
when we do that, Forte's brain is blowing up because that may be another full-time person that does nothing but maintain public restrooms 8 hours a day. And then we have to worry about not everyone that visits our facilities as respectful as we might be and might want to destroy something that is not a stainless steel prison toilet. And so it's a sad reality that we even have to talk about this, but it's just been a pet peeve of mine since I went to that park and I was like, wow, this is better than the restrooms we have in our city.
well,
It's-
and LPGA is one of the most beautiful parks around. And then you go into the bathrooms and I'm even like cringing when I go in.
Oh,
And
it's-
lots of people are that way,
It's
so.
a challenge, and,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know the answer. The answers are going to be expensive, whatever it is. But, you know, the system that we have in there, it's basically block walls, stainless steel toilets and sinks. In the facilities where we have porcelain, like up at the dog park, they get damaged, they get broken. And we go in there and they do clean the facilities regularly. They pressure wash the facilities. It's the old saying is you can't keep anything nice because nobody treats it nice. So, you know, I hate to invest, you know, tens of thousands of dollars into another toilet facility for it to be trashed within a week. We'll take a look and see the
And
most
I
recent.
think, not knowing what I'm talking about, but I think some of the challenges are the surfaces in there.
Right.
So that when you pressure clean concrete, it still looks dirty and it absorbs odors. Whereas if we were to seal it with an epoxy coating, it could go in there and these facilities I went, it was like a head on a boat. It was all fiberglass. So you could just basically spray the whole inside of the thing, put some bleach on it, and spray it again, and
Yeah, we looked at
was
a company
spotless.
that does that. They go in there and they clean everything to a T, and then they reseal it, and it's got that epoxy finish on, and everything just slides off. In fact, I had, you know, Steve priced that out a couple of months ago, just to get an idea of what it would cost, several $1,000s per stall. So we'll continue to look at it and see what the options are, but I'm with you, it's very frustrating that people don't treat
I know.
these facilities with any kind of kindness. And again, they're attractions to homeless and people that use it for reasons other than what they're designed for, and it becomes a problem.
Commissioner Johnson, you raised your hand.
I just had a question for,
Speak into the mic, lean forward.
sorry, I just had a question for Mr. Penny over there. How did they have a public restroom with no electricity and no water?
there were sawdust toilets.
Huh?
There were compost toilets.
Wow.
It was amazing. It was clean. There was no smell and it was very clean.
Wow. Mr. Forte, what time does our new bathrooms at Ross Point, what times are those open?
They're dawn to dusk, well, I know they're a little later, 10 o'clock.
Okay, because
Like Sunrise Park.
I took my daughter there Saturday, and it was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and both of the doors were locked. While I was there, a city worker pulled up, went, knocked on the doors, unlocked them, looked in, closed it. After he left, when we went to leave, my daughter had to go to the bathroom, so we tried to go in. The men's was locked, so then I tried to open the women's, and it was closed too, so she couldn't go to the bathroom.
What happens is people, we have automatic locks, they're on timers. And they have a battery backup in the back. People steal them all the time.
Really?
Steal the
So what
batteries.
happens with, when you steal the battery,
It automatically locks.
stop working.
If it's in the locked position, it stays locked. If it's in the open position, it stays open.
So he had to probably manually unlock it, probably?
Manually unlock
Oh,
That's the part of the problem we're having, plus you have to replace it.
that's crazy.
Yeah, Steve was just telling us about that yesterday, because that's one of the problems, is these things, and these folks, they know it. So they know that if they could break the battery system off the back when it's in an open position, well, then they have 24-hour access to it.
Sometimes they're lucky, sometimes they're not.
That's
So that's what
sad.
happened.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's frustrating for us because we have to repair it and then it locks it and people can't use it.
That's sad. Okay. We have 5 more minutes. Is there any other comments before we end this workshop? All right, seeing none, this workshop is adjourned. We'll meet in 5 minutes for the commission meeting.
Hey, Joe, our